Welcome to the ADHD Human Design Podcast, where we talk honestly about what it's really like to have ADHD and explore how human design can help you finally make sense of yourself. I'm your host, Nicole G., psychologist and human design guide. Welcome to the show. I was 28 when I got officially diagnosed with ADHD. At the time, I was already working as a special education teacher and going to school to be a psychologist. And I was spending my days building accommodations for kids whose brains work differently, and then coming home and quietly doing the same thing for myself. Learning to work with my own wiring and not against it became something that I did almost instinctively. It was just what I knew how to do. Human design came along for me more than a decade later. By then, I had systems, I had language for what I needed, and by that time, I had spent years inside the intersection of psychology, education, and nervous system work for myself and other people. So when I first discovered human design, I didn't approach it as a beginner necessarily would. I came to it with a trained eye. And almost immediately, I started doing the same thing I had always done, adapting it for myself, translating it for myself, building accommodations that worked for me into the framework of human design itself. But what I didn't expect was how badly those were needed. Because human design assumes a neurotypical nervous system. The more I learned about human design, the more I noticed what wasn't being said in the human design community. Human design, as it's commonly taught, assumes that you have a baseline of nervous system functioning. That your nervous system can just do the thing, like wait to respond, trust your authority, ride your emotional wave. And these aren't bad instructions, but they're written for brains and nervous systems that experience time, impulse control, focus, and emotions in a fairly linear way. For example, a manifesting generator type in human design with emotional authority and an undefined root filtered through an ADHD nervous system is a completely different equation than someone with the same human design chart with a neurotypical nervous system. No one was mentioning things such as that an undefined root center can amplify urgency in ways that feel neurologically identical to ADHD-driven impulsivity. That executive dysfunction can distort the generator and manifesting generator's sacral response. Or how when your dopamine system is dysregulated, it's genuinely hard to know whether you're feeling a body-based yes to something or just a spike. That waiting for emotional clarity lands very differently when your emotional baseline is already dysregulated and rejection sensitivity is layered on top of everything. So people with ADHD were doing what I had done with every other system before I knew better, trying to follow the instructions exactly, wondering why it wasn't working, and then concluding that something was wrong with them. When I moved into giving human design readings and doing human design coaching, I started hearing a similar kind of frustration. Clients and students, many of them already carrying an ADHD diagnosis, describing the same quiet defeat that I knew very well. They'd studied their charts, they understood the concepts, they were trying, and yet human design felt like something that worked for everyone else but was somehow slipping through their fingers. I knew that feeling very well. And I also knew what was underneath it. It wasn't that human design was necessarily wrong for them. It was that something important in the translation was definitely missing. The same way that a classroom curriculum isn't wrong just because a child has ADHD, it just hasn't been adapted for the way that their brain works yet. Human design was being handed to people with ADHD without any of the accommodations that make it actually usable for their brains. Human design describes energy mechanics. ADHD affects executive functioning, dopamine regulation, impulse control, and emotional processing. These are not the same system, and when you overlay one without acknowledging the other, you don't always create alignment. You can also create some shame. What I've come to understand, both from my own experience and years of working with clients, is that accessing the potential in your human design chart is a nervous system dependent process. Strategy and authority in human design are not personality traits that you can simply decide to embody. Instead, they're regulatory access points. What I mean by this is that when your nervous system is dysregulated, when you're experiencing things like rejection sensitivity, executive functioning shutdown, or a period of intense hyperfocus, you're not failing at your design, you're just not yet in the physiological state where your design may
be actually accessible to you. And that changes everything about how we need to teach this. For someone with ADHD, the sacral response might be faster and louder. The emotional wave may require more somatic anchoring before it becomes readable. If your focus arrives in sprints rather than sustained stretches, that's not resistance, it's biology. Your undefined centers in human design that might produce gentle sensitivity in a neurotypical person may feel like full system overstimulation for a person with an ADHD nervous system. And these aren't problems to solve, they're just the actual terrain that we're dealing with. And I don't believe that your ADHD is blocking your design. I believe it's part of it. Your ADHD is the texture of how your design actually expresses itself. When you have ADHD, your open centers in your human design chart don't just amplify other people's energy, they amplify it through a neurodivergent lens, which means that the wisdom available in those centers might be more nuanced, more perceptive, and more overwhelming than what the standard human design teaching accounts for. And when you have ADHD, your human design authority might not speak in the clean, calm whisper that a lot of the human design teachers and textbooks describe. It might speak in short bursts, in body sensations you've been trained to override, in a knowing that shows up at 2 a.m. when your medication has worn off and you've stopped pretending to hold it all together. And none of that means that something is wrong with you or that there's something wrong with human design. It just means that the teaching is most likely incomplete. If you have ADHD and then found human design and felt that initial rush of recognition like, yes, this is me, and then quietly hit a wall trying to actually live it, that wall isn't any evidence of misalignment. I believe that it's simply evidence that you were handed an incomplete map without being told that it was drawn for someone else's landscape. Your human design chart was never the problem. Your ADHD also was never the problem. The translation between the two was, and that's exactly what we're here to fix.
If you enjoyed the show, come find me on Substack, where I publish articles that go deeper into everything we've covered here. And make sure you follow the show so you can get notified when I drop a new episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again soon.